People that have a disability don't want their disability to define them. Your disability is just one part of who you are.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Hi, Teresa. My name is Erin Suelmann. I am the Executive Director of the Down Syndrome Association of Greater St. Louis. We are based in St. Louis. We're in Brentwood, but we actually serve about 150-mile radius of the city of St. Louis. So we serve families not only in St. Louis County, but in St. Charles County, St. Louis City, the Metro East Illinois, and then as far down as Cape Girardeau and Carbondale. So a pretty wide geographic area. And we serve about 2,200 individuals with Down syndrome and their families across the lifespan. So from when they're born all the way through end of life. Tell me about yourself.
Hi, Erin. My name is Teresa Saunders. I'm a resident at Vitalia Rockside in Seven Hills, Ohio.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I am a retired registered nurse.
Great. Awesome.
Although I've maintained my license, and just in case I want to go back to work.
Good for you. Well, there's a lot of need for nurses out there for sure. Well, that's exciting. I'm excited to talk with you about Down syndrome and any shared knowledge we have about that topic.
That sounds good.
So do you want me to start off by telling you a little bit about Down syndrome?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Down syndrome is a genetic condition, and it is caused by a third copy of the 21st chromosome. Individuals with Down syndrome have 47 chromosomes instead of the usual 46 that you and I have. And that is what causes the physical and intellectual and developmental delays that are characteristic of people with Down syndrome. And it was discovered by Dr. John Langdon Down in 1862. So that is why it's called Down syndrome. Many people say Downs, but it's actually Down syndrome with a capital D, lowercase s. It occurs in about 1 in every 700 live births. And so it's the most frequently occurring genetic condition in live births.
Are there any known causes of Down syndrome?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So Down syndrome, it's just caused by an error in cell division. It's called non-disjunction. It's not, we don't know why this happens. It's totally random. We know that it happens at conception when the sperm meets the egg, and it's not related to anything that the mother has done during pregnancy or has not done during pregnancy. So we talk a lot about that in our community presentations. We don't want anybody to feel like there is stigma around having a child with Down syndrome, because it really is a totally random occurrence. And we see families from all backgrounds having children with Down syndrome. There is an increased risk with maternal age advances. So there is that happens. So the risk goes up as maternal age increases, but actually 80% of all children with Down syndrome are born to women under 35 years of age, because more people under 35 years of age are having babies. So that's just how that works. And there's actually 3 types of Down syndrome. The most common is trisomy 21. It's 95% of people with Down syndrome have trisomy, and that's when there's 3 full copies of the 21st chromosome. There's also translocation, when a part of chromosome 21 breaks off during cell division and attaches to another chromosome. And then there's mosaicism, when the third copy of the 21st chromosome only exists in some of the cells, not all of the cells. So it's really interesting. Down syndrome is very, very interesting. We always like to say that people with Down syndrome have a little something extra, or they're extraordinary because they have an extra chromosome.
That's neat. So that brings me to my next question. How do people with Down syndrome generally prefer to be referred to or referred?
Yeah. Oh, gosh, it's so such an important question, and something that the Down Syndrome Association, it's one of our core missions, is to just raise awareness about Down syndrome. And the lives of people with Down syndrome and their families. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is using people first language. And this is really important. I'm sure in your years of being a nurse, you have experienced this, but people that have a disability typically don't want their disability to define them. And so we talk about, you are a person first, and your disability is just one part of who you are, or your unique abilities are just one part of who you are. So we talk about people first language, which basically just means I am a person with Down syndrome, or that is a child with Down syndrome. I don't have Down syndrome, but that is a person with Down syndrome, or it is a child with Down syndrome. It's not a Downs kid. It's not a Downs baby. They are people, and they happen to have Down syndrome. So that is how we like to refer to individuals with Down syndrome, and that is how they like to be referred to. First and foremost, they're just people. Usually they like to be called by their names, like we all do. And then Down syndrome is just one piece of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important too to realize that, if you are encountering somebody that has a child with Down syndrome, don't say, I'm so sorry. Don't say you're affected by Down syndrome, or you're afflicted with or suffers from. It's not a disease. It's just, it's a condition that they were born with, like many other things that people happen to be born with.
Right. What is what are some misconceptions about Down syndrome?
Oh gosh. There are so many misconceptions about all kinds of people in this world, right? I think we all go through the world believing that we understand the lives of other people that we come across, but we usually don't. And people with Down syndrome are no different. So I think there's a lot of fear when people don't understand disability. And I'm sure that you've had this experience in your life. The less we know, the more fearful we become about anything. So people often think that somebody with Down syndrome is going to have a very low IQ. They're not going to be intelligent. And that is not the case. Most people with Down syndrome have just, mild to moderate intellectual disability. And actually, people with Down syndrome are always surprising me with how wonderful their memories are, and how much they know. And, one of the most amazing things to me is their incredible level of empathy. So, they have really high EQs, which is this emotional intelligence that we like to talk about. And so I think, that's a huge misconception, that people with Down syndrome just are not very intelligent. And that's not the case. They need more time than maybe the neurotypical individuals to, learn math or learn reading. They might need different strategies to learn those things, but it doesn't mean that they can't learn those things in time. And some things are just a little bit more difficult to grasp. Like my brother is 36 and he has Down syndrome, and grasping the concept of, money and how to put coins together. And that's just really challenging for him. And same thing with telling time. It's very abstract, so that's difficult for him. Luckily, we all have these amazing things now that we carry around in our pockets, cell phones that can tell us the time and that can do math for us. So, we're living in a world now where these sorts of challenges are becoming alleviated through technology, which is really cool. There's also a lot of misconceptions about what people with Down syndrome are going to be able to do. Like they're never going to be able to go to college, or they're never going to be able to live on their own, or they're never going to be able to have a job or get married. And so none of those things are true. We have many of our individuals with Down syndrome are attending, college courses, either through community college or some of the special programs that universities are developing now. They are getting married. Many work. So I always like to talk about how again, like many things in life, it is our community that is creating barriers. It's not the person with Down syndrome or the person with a disability that has challenges they can't overcome. We need to think about reshaping our community to make things more accessible for people with disabilities.
What is the relationship between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's? I was surprised when I was doing some reading about the subject of Down, and because I've not come across this in my career, and I guess I never thought about it. We've had as a child, you have the physical characteristics that you look for and they're diagnosed with, but as they're aging, they're living longer now because we have better medicine, and we're helping with those physical problems. They're living longer, so now they're developing. The Down person is developing dementia and Alzheimer's, and so what's that relationship?
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is such an interesting topic that we're just starting to learn more about, I think, in the last 10 years, this relationship between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease and dementia. We've always known that there was advanced aging and characteristics of advanced aging with Down syndrome. And so there was something about that 21st chromosome that affected the way people age. And like you said, people with Down syndrome are living longer. So in the 80s, people with Down syndrome were only living into their 20s or 30s because we weren't paying attention to their unique healthcare needs. But now, because we are devoting energy and time and resources and appropriate healthcare and inclusion of people with Down syndrome, they're living longer. And so the life expectancy is now in the 60s for people with Down syndrome, which is really awesome just in the last, 30 years. Almost 40 years. I'm not going to age myself, but almost 40 years. And so, what we have learned now, because people have advocated for research to be done on this, so the National Institutes of Health are really dedicating more time and energy to researching Down syndrome and Alzheimer's. We know that the 21st chromosome carries a gene that produces the amyloid precursor protein. So that's very scientific, but what that means is that that protein is what causes the plaques to develop in the brain. So because people with Down syndrome have a third copy of that gene, a third copy of that chromosome, they're developing additional proteins and then, additional plaques and tangles in the brain, which are characteristic of Alzheimer's. And then, as you're a nurse, so that, the plaques and the tangles in the brain is what disrupts the typical brain functioning. And that's where we start to see the symptoms. So the plaque buildup in the brain is actually seen in almost all adults with Down syndrome over the age of 40. So isn't that remarkable? Yeah. Almost 100% of people with Down syndrome are going to develop those plaques and tangles in their brain over the age of 40. And about 50% of people with Down syndrome in their 60s are going to have Alzheimer's disease. Mm-hmm.
Do all of them develop? They don't necessarily all develop. They have some form of dementia and it progresses into Alzheimer's, or is it one or the other, or?
Yeah, and I think that's the really interesting thing about it too, is so, what is it about people with Down syndrome that they all have these plaques and tangles, but
Mhm,
they're not all developing the symptoms of Alzheimer's. So we're researching that as well. Like,
mhm.
um, half of people will actually develop Alzheimer's, but they all have the plaques and tangles. So is it that they just aren't living into their 70s and 80s and developing Alzheimer's? What's going on there? So there's a lot of work being done, a lot of research being done around that. But we also know that about 50% of all babies with Down syndrome are born with heart defects.
Mhm.
So that is also, it puts them at increased risk of early onset dementia. And then, just kind of the additional things that go along with advanced aging, like changes in behavior, seizures that start earlier in adulthood than you would see in a typical person, changes in just walking and coordination. So it's a really delicate balance as you're starting to see older people with Down syndrome that, maybe it's not dementia, maybe it's not Alzheimer's, but you're just seeing this advanced aging. So our association is really trying to help educate medical professionals to ensure they know how to work with our older community of people.
Mhm. Thank you. And then, where do you see the Down syndrome community progressing in the future?
Well, you tell me, Teresa, how have you seen, in your experience, what changes have you seen in the disability community doing your work?
Yeah, I can. So I graduated from nursing school in 1982. So I've been a nurse for 40 years. So when I did my psych nursing, um, I did it in West Virginia. I was going to college in West Virginia, and the at that point, a lot of children or young adults with Down syndrome, families didn't know how to take care of them. There was that stigma. They were institutionalized with in the psych hospitals. And it was I was so traumatized because I can remember them having they were just I was in Weston, West Virginia, and what's now they use it as a at Halloween. They do the haunted house
Oh,
thing, but that's where I did my um, psych nursing. And I can just remember they had all these people in these huge cinder block rooms, and they just turned hoses on them. It was so awful,
wow.
that I thought. But so we've come a long way since that, and that you we're more accepting of it. We're working with people. We're giving them. We recognize that they're human beings and that they need to be treated with kindness and compassion, and that you just they can work. They can have they have feelings.
Mhm.
So I think that we've progressed a lot in the fact that, I mean, even here at Vitalia, we've used um, workers that maybe don't have downs but are challenged,
Mhm.
and uh, you know but they're doing work, and so that it's meaningful for them.
Mhm. Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. I just think that is such an important lesson for us, because if we don't look back at our history and all of the mistakes that we have made, we can't look at what we're doing right now and make sure we're not making the same mistakes. We have to use history as like a lens through which to look at our current actions and our current behaviors. And it is heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. And, my brother's 36. So that was not that
That long ago.
that long ago that was happening. And we were founded, our organization was founded in 1976, so about 46 years ago.
Mhm.
So I think that you're so right. Because of the advocacy of caring individuals like yourself and of parents and of health professionals that are recognizing the humanity in people with Down syndrome and other disabilities, all kinds of disabilities, we're able to say, this is not okay, and we're going to fight for inclusion, and we're going to fight for our kids to be in the classroom, and we're going to fight for healthcare and all of those things. And it's been a long journey, but
Because even in schools, they have the IEPs now, and they're part of the classroom. They don't have to be in a separate classroom.
right,
So,
right, absolutely. And our work is not done, so we're continuing to continue to advocate for the needs of people with Down syndrome. And so, you're still having to advocate for appropriate education, and funding for education is a huge issue right now. So, making sure that all kids have what they need to succeed. And then I think, to the point that we were just talking about with Alzheimer's and dementia, continuing to advocate for really good health care and research around those healthcare challenges. But I see my brother, he works and he participates in a lot of the programs that we have at the association, but he volunteers at the APA, and he worked for a long time at a like a doggy daycare place, and he loved that, and he was taking the bus and does sports and has girlfriends. And so, I think that it's life is good, and we're just gonna continue to grow that, and we're gonna continue to work on inclusion, and we're gonna continue to break down all of the barriers that society has put up for people with disabilities, so they can live inclusive in the community, and do everything everybody else does.
mhm. How can people support the Down syndrome community?
Oh, yeah, there are such easy ways that you can support the Down syndrome community. And I think this is step one, right? Just educating people and raising
Right.
awareness. Because I think there's going to be a lot of your residents that don't know anybody with Down syndrome,
Mhm,
or have the same experience that you had, Teresa, 40 years ago when people with disabilities were put in institutions.
mhm,
So raising awareness is number one. That's what we always say. And so, having people come and work at your retirement community. And when you see people out in the community, smile and say hi, strike up a conversation. You're going to see people working at your local coffee shop or the grocery store. Um, and so I think that's the number one way, is just to continue to spread awareness, use people first language,
mhm,
see their humanity and talk to them and engage them like you would anyone else. And if you have the opportunity to educate somebody else that you're with, do that. And so now all
right.
of your residents are going to have this information about Down syndrome. So I hope that they can spread the word and educate others as well, even if it's just a little nugget
Mhm,
about something that they've learned.
right. How can people support family members and loved ones with Down syndrome?
Um, I think I'm going to go back to people first language. So, you might have a grandchild one day that's born with Down syndrome, or a great niece, or great nephew, or whatever the case may be, or a friend's child,
Mhm,
and just congratulate them like you would if they were having a baby without Down syndrome, and say, "We're so happy that you have this new baby. Um, have you been in touch with the Down Syndrome Association? They're going to be a great support to you." Use
mhm,
people first language, be supportive, set high expectations for that child. Don't say that they're not going to be able to ride a bike and they're not going to be able to work. And I'm so sorry. Don't say any of that. Those kiddos are going to have awesome lives, and they're going to do great things. So I think that's what we always tell, especially our grandparents, when they have a new grandbaby with Down syndrome. It's like, it's going to be great. Just be
mhm,
supportive and be there and love that kiddo like you would love any of your grandbabies.
mhm,
And that kind of goes the same with anybody, right?
mhm,
So they're just like everybody else. That's what we always say. We're more alike than different.
mhm, right. So I think that wraps up the questions that I have for
Yeah.
today. I appreciate your time. speaking with me.
Oh, of course. This was so great. And we're here as a resource. Again, we're the Down Syndrome Association of Greater St. Louis. You can learn more at our website, which is dsagsl.org. We've got tons of great information on there if you just want to learn more, or if you know somebody that has a child of any age with Down syndrome, please connect them with us because we've got a lot of fun things going on. Thanks
Thank you
for
so
sharing
much.
your knowledge and your experience with me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
And I think to myself, what a